When I thought of the theme for the Masque of the Red Death, it was kind of obvious. Death is inevitable. This theme is very apparent throughout the whole story. One way Edgar Allan Poe demonstrated this theme was through the amazing imagery used. One example of this would be the different colored rooms that are mentioned. Also, these rooms could be considered symbolism as well. Now, at first, you wouldn't think the rooms mean anything, but they go back to that central theme of life and death. Arranged in a row from east to west, the 7 color-coded rooms are symbolic of the progression of life. The stages they represent are birth, blue, youth, purple, adolescence, green, adulthood, orange, old age, white, imminent death, violet, and death itself, black and red. And in the 7th room, which represents death, is the room where Prospero chases the stranger. It is also the room that everyone at the party avoids until the very end of the story. Once Prospero and the other nobles cross into the room, they all contract the Red Death and immediately die. Now, let's talk about the clock. The clock is a piece of symbolism and a piece of the story that supports the theme. Have you ever heard the phrase, "time is running out"? Well, if the black room represents death, and there is a huge black clock in the room that marks each and every passing hour so loudly that all the guests at the party take note of it, it seems fairly obvious that the clock is a symbolism of the fleetingness of life and the inevitability of death. You can hide and try to escape the plague, but you can't hide from death itself. Even if you manage to avoid the plague, you will still die of old age eventually. Now let's look at a metaphor. Blood was its avatar and its seal. This quote is a metaphor because the author directly associates blood with an avatar and a seal of death without using the traditional simile format. Let's think of Poe's writing in this story as having 2 parts, lines, or structure, and color. Kind of like a painter. Structurally, everything's clearly defined and logical. It's composed, it's put together from lots of individual units, which then unite to build a larger whole. I say this because of how neatly the story divides on both the paragraph and the sentence level. Most of Poe's paragraphs are very short or very long, and each of the long ones describes a single thing. The first describes the Red Death, the second, Prospero's castle retreat, the 5th describes the clock, and so on. The paragraphs, in turn, are usually put together from lots of fairly short sentences that are structurally simple. They're like little atoms, each with just 1 or 2 details which build up the larger whole. Sometimes the sentences just form something sort of like a list of details, as in this paragraph. There was much glare and glitter and piquancy and phantasm, much of what has been since seen in Hernani. There were arabesque figures with unsuited limbs and appointments. There were delirious fancies such as the madman fashions. There was much of the beautiful, much of the wanton, much of the bizarre, something of the terrible, and not a little of that which might have excited disgust. Here, Poe's sentences are not only short, they're practically identical in their simple structure, beginning with "there were" or "there were much." Poe then infuses that structure with life by filling in the color. Much of the color and life in the writing comes from his word choice. Sometimes it depends upon the vividness or dramatic quality of the individual words, like arabesque figures or delirious fancies. In other places, it's Poe's use of figurative language, like the alliteration between glare and glitter. And Poe's spot-on word choice just adds to the feeling of how composed and well put together his writing is, and then in turn supports the theme.